All right, we're gonna start the breakout in a second here, so just wrap up the last bit of your coding and so we're gonna be continuing with the theme that we started this morning of HTTP and APIs, and we're gonna be focusing on how we can do more HTTP requests with our Node applications. Some of us might have started the GitHub API loader thing. We're going to do something a bit similar and see how we do it. Some of the extra things we're going to be focusing on are things around how do we control our environment variables? How do we control things that maybe we are unique to each person who uses our application, or things that we might want to keep secret? We're going to be continuing exploring HTTP requests, and we're going to be using request, which is a node package or node module that makes things a bit easier than the HTTP one that we were using this morning. And then, of course, we're going to look at access tokens, headers, and environment variables. So start with request. It's this node module that makes it easier to do HTTP requests. We'll look at the docs here, but basically request, what do you need? Okay. Basically, it helps with our buffering. So we saw this morning when we did HTTP or HTTPS, we opened this stream of data, and we had to parse all of the chunks that were coming in into a buffer. With request, we don't have to think about that as much. It pre-buffers everything for us. So as always, if we're looking at a different package, we can look at npm.js.com and has all the documentation that we need for it here. So here's a small example. We're requiring request and then using it to get from this path. And here we see we get 3 parameters: error, response, and body. And they're console logging all 3. But the big thing is that this body is a fully buffered body. It's not like one chunk. Request waits until all of the chunks come in before it runs its callback function, whereas our HTTP module this morning, it didn't wait until all the chunks came in. It just waited until the initial response came in. So our goal is to make an application that gets all the issues from a node repository and displays them. You have a similar problem where you're getting all of the GitHub avatar URLs. So let's first look at the GitHub API information. And this is like a big, kind of confusing documentation thing. We're just going to look specifically at get right now. So if we go to a get method to /repos, giving it, whenever we see this colon, that usually means it's a variable. So we have a variable owner and a variable repo. So if we give it a specific owner and a specific repo, this documentation is telling us that we're going to get this object in return. So all of this information. And if our goal, if our goal was to get, what did we want? All of the issues that have been placed for a certain repo. If we look in this documentation, let's try and find issues. If I do issues, it's going to search every single thing on this documentation page. So here we have some stuff. We have issue events, issues URL, whether it has issues. And then somewhere down here, I think there's like a list of issues. Or maybe not. We'll figure it out. But anyways, the rest of the documentation here, like I said, it's really big. You're probably not going to use most of it. So I've included a link just to this get request that is, or the get part of the API documentation. So this is the thing you're going to be focusing on for your activity. And you can look at the other stuff, but it might not be super helpful. So we're going to be using this endpoint, repo / for testing, we'll use jQuery as our repo owner name / jQuery being the repo itself. And then we're going to be looking at, /issues. So this is owner / repo. There's another endpoint for /issues that gives all the issues. And that's the one that we're going to be using. So because request is a module, but it's not a built-in module like HTTP that we used this morning, we're going to have to set up a project file, project folder too. So in breakout, I'm going to make a new folder. We can call it request. And then inside request, I'm going to make a new file, and I'm going to call it get issues.javascript. And what was the step that I needed to do before I could do something like this? Request equals. What do I need to do before this is going to work for me? If I'm using this like node module, where is it getting it from? Where is it getting request from? Yeah, it's looking to get it from npm, or specifically it's looking to get it from a folder called node_modules. And that doesn't exist yet, so to start up our project, I can go into terminal. I'm going to find where we are. We are in breakout, and then we called it request. So step one is get init. This is going to make my application, or sorry, not get init, npm init. Get init is nice too, but npm init is going to initialize my project as a npm project. And so I can just hit enter on all these default things. We get the preview of my package.json. And I hit enter, and it's going to create our new package.json file here. And then specifically for this example, we want access to that module request. So I'm going to do npm install request, and I'm going to give it the -- save flag. So it's saying your project's name is called request. I'm not going to let you install another thing inside your project called request. So let's get out of there. Let's make a better name. We'll call it GitHub Gets. We'll go inside GitHub Gets. I'll make a GitHub Gets JavaScript file. And now we'll do the npm init. Enter, 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 enter. That's OK. Then npm install request, the -- save. And looks like it's working better this time. So looking in our directory, we see, well, in the correct one, not in request, we created the GitHub gets. We have a package.json, its dependency is request, and in our node modules folder, we see a bunch of things, but one of them is request. So if inside our main thing, we try to require request, we'll be able to get it now. Is that big enough? A little bit bigger? Cool. So we kind of saw this, but request, if I go request, its default is doing a get request, and I can give it some info first, and then it's going to take a callback that gives me an error. It gives me, let's see. There were 3 things. Let's check the documentation. It was error, response, and body. Okay. So error, response, and body. In here, we have also more options than our HTTP module that we used this morning. We can pass it just a straight up string with the path name, or we can give it an object that has key value pairs on the type of information that we want to do the request on. So one of them maybe being path, another one maybe being headers. It gives us more flexibility on how we're creating our requests. So with ours, if we look at the documentation, this simple example, they've just used a string. For ours, we're going to do something similar to here. See, they have this object that they're creating. So the key value pairs being like lots of different things that we can put together. URI. They don't use header information here, but that's the main reason that we're going to be wanting to use this request object as opposed to a string, because we also want to be able to set header information. So here, we'll specify the UI, and the UI we wanted to use was to our API endpoint with jQuery as the user and repo. And actually, for now, I think that's all we'll try and pass. Okay. And the last thing we'll do is we're just going to surround this in a function. And we'll console log the error. We'll do a console log the response. And we'll do a console log of the body. And maybe we'll do a little bit of text beforehand so that it's kind of easier to see. response body, and we also need a comma here. All right. And then finally, we'll just call our function. Right now, it doesn't need any parameters, so we won't give it any. Node get GitHub gets. So we see a bunch of things being printed out. Again, we're going to get lots of information. Mm. You mean for here? For this part? So instead of doing it like, where did we have it? Like this? Oh, you mean the GitHub? So this one? And what are we doing different? What were you saying? Yeah. Yeah, well, we had opened up the get one. We're doing this structure, except we're also getting the issues. So somewhere here, let's look, repo/issues. Actually, I don't know if it actually has it on this page, but within this get response here, it lists somewhere, oh, if you want to get all the issues, use like this other URL. So that's how we kind of got to our /issues thing. Is that kind of, where was it? Yeah, here, so we have issues URL, and that's repos/name/user/issues, and here it has an optional number. So we can look for all the issues, or we can look for a specific issues number. Again, this is like not the best documentation from them, but that's where I was getting this thing from. So, but in our terminal, we see error, so no error. Our response was this incoming message, and these are all the like key value pairs that are giving us information about our response. Its encoding is UTF-8. A lot of this stuff we're not worrying about. And then after all of this response information, we should get, I definitely scrolled past it, but we have another thing where we're printing out just the body. And our body is also a big thing of JSON. Okay. So, but already much easier than HTTP. I'm just getting the body right here. I'm not having to do any listening for chunks coming in. I'm not having to listen for the end of a response. Finish true cycle. Actually, let's. So our body, though, is at the bottom here. It says, request forbidden by administrative rules. Please make sure your request has a user agent header. So our request was successful by, like, it returned information, but the body is telling us that GitHub is not liking our request because we didn't have this thing called a user agent header. So if we remember from this morning, we had headers. They're key value pairs that can be set in the request and also are sent back in the response. They're providing both parties with some extra information on what they're getting or what they're being asked for. For our request to be successful, we have to set the user agent header. The user agent header lets the server know what agent the request is coming from. Browsers automatically will set this header for us. If we're using curl, it's automatically set. If they're using Postman, it's automatically set. But if we're using an application that we've made ourselves with request, we do want to set it ourselves. So in our code, right here, this was the old one. In our request kind of object that we're defining, we also want to set the headers, and that's going to be an object. I think we're needing a comma up here. And what we needed to set was user agent. So we can just copy that right from the information that they gave us. Get that. Oh. User agent. Going to need strings probably because we got that dash in there. And we want to set that to something. Most APIs aren't actually going to care what we set this to because there's not a set thing that we could just say node application. We could say like GitHub gets. It's just saying who we are. So we'll leave with GitHub gets. Let's save that. And actually in our console log, I'm going to get rid of these two just to make it a little clearer. And so we run it. And now we're getting something that looks more like jQuery data. We're not getting that. So that's jQuery data, whereas if we get rid of this, and I run it again, that is a forbidden message saying we don't have a user agent. We add the user agent, and it was working for us. OK, so that's nice. And we kind of have a practical example of when we actually need to use headers as opposed to, oh, like the key value pairs and they provide information sometimes. The other thing that we can see as a practical example for using headers are access tokens. So some APIs will require access tokens. And these are just unique identifiers that let the API know who you are when you use the API. And it allows the API to kind of block or restrict anonymous traffic, control the number of calls that are made to the API, and identify usage patterns. So like bots, anyone can make requests to these API points by their nature because they're open URLs. Passing access token just lets them control that a little more. You know, they have to pay for server usage for everything they're sending out. Maybe they want to make sure that you're a real GitHub user before they're going to let you make some ridiculous amount of calls to their API. That's the one kind of main reason. They can also then collect a bunch of data on who's using their APIs and how they're using it. Maybe they use that to like better their APIs. Maybe they don't. But for us, the main thing we're going to be using access tokens is so that we can make more and more requests. And because we're working here in a shared space through one internet connection, the number of calls that we can make as like anonymous users, often we run out of it because so many people in here are using calls to the API. So a access token lets us say, no, we're not part of this like group collective, we're a specific person, give us, you know, much more calls to the API. So with GitHub, we just go and we sign in. And I go up on the right side to settings. And in this kind of menu here, I can go down to the bottom to developer settings. And here there's an option for personal access tokens. If I click on that, I can hit generate new token. And it's wanting me to make sure I'm in. So new personal access token. The note is just for you to identify it for later. So I can say like breakout. And then I can select the scopes of it. I'm just going to leave it as is. I'm going to hit generate token. And it makes this string of letters and numbers for me. This is my token. This is also my only chance to like copy this token. So I can copy it here. Once I continue or go off this page, it won't let me get this token anymore. That's not like the end of the world because you can just generate another one. But that's their method of securing it. Like for instance, this week 1, day 4. If I open that in a new tab, I can't get it, but I can regenerate it if I want to. So copy it while you can. And we'll go into our project. And I want to use this token somewhere. So the way I can use it with GitHub is I set a new header, authorization, I believe. And I set its value to be that token that I just copied. At least that would make sense, but they also want you to add token before your token. So if you do token space the big string of tokens, you can also use bearer. Either or will work for you. And for this, we're just going to look at the response. Response. Okay. So somewhere in here, you guys can help me look too. It's going to tell us our requests, like how many requests. Oh, here, nope, not high water mark. It's going to tell us how many requests we are allowed to make with our new access token. So here we go. So we have these 3 X rate limit. My limit is 5,000 requests. I have 4,998 remaining. If we go back here and I remove this authorization thing and we run my request again, we scroll all the way back up. It wasn't below this, was it? Here we go. So now I only have a limit of 60 requests, and I only have 30 remaining. Because again, this is a pool for not just me, but kind of whoever is connecting from this area. That's for any request from their API, regardless of the path I use. So practically, throwing in this authorization token, just gives me so many more requests. And that 5,000 requests is like per time limit too. So tomorrow, I'll have a full new set of 5,000 requests, or even less than that probably. They usually do some number of hours. Cool. So this is nice. I have so many more requests. I can be asking GitHub all day about all these different things, but I want to be able to share my source code of my application with any number of you guys, but I want to be keeping my configuration separate. I kind of, this key I generated here is like my key. I don't want you guys all using it. I want GitHub, I want all of my requests to myself. And that's kind of a problem because right now it's just plain old listed in my code. I want each developer on a team to be able to provide a different configuration. In this case, maybe a different access token. And I also want to be able to change like the configuration based on what the application is doing. For now, I'm using my personal API code. Maybe when we launch this new GitHub Gets application, we pay for like a super API access token that gives us like millions of token accesses. Another example could be sometimes you have configuration data for which database you're connecting to. When it's on my machine, I want to connect to my local database. I'm giving you the project. I want you to be able to connect to your database. These are things within the configurations of my app, within the environment variables of my app. They're not key to the logic or how my application operates, but they're key to connecting my application to things on my computer or things over the network. Your operating system itself runs all of these like node applications within an environment. A user or administrator can set variables specific to that environment. And you can list these current variables with this keyword export, and you can also set them with the same keyword and some extra stuff afterwards. So within my terminal, we'll get rid of some of that. If I just type export, we can see all these key value pairs. So most of them aren't going to make sense. Maybe the odd one jumps out making sense. One environment variable I have in my machine right now is user is set to Travis. Unity has 3D support. True. Different things like that. Our applications can use these, and we can also set them ourselves. So if I go export and I want to do test, and I want to set that equal to dogs, and I hit enter. Oh, I don't need these spaces. And now I just do the plain export to list them all. This was the first one that was malformed. But if we go up to test, this was the one I made correctly. So test is dogs now. So that's useful because all of these variables are only specific to my machine. If I get your environmental variable, it's not going to be for a user, it's not going to be Travis, it's going to be whatever your username is for your computer. So this is kind of a start of a way that we can use to customize our configuration based on your computer, your environment, not based on the code that I'm running myself. So this was our example. The other way you can set a environment variable is with a particular execution of a program. So if we use key equals value and then we say, okay, node run this script, node is going to have this particular process variable or environment variable within the runtime of that application. And it can be accessed within JavaScript node applications with process.env.thevariable_name. So if we go, well, first let's edit our code so that we can see it. Let's do a console log process.env.test. And then before we run this, if we go test equals dogs, node, what was it? GitHub gets. So test equals dog. And I run that application. We see it printed out dog for a quick second, and then we got this big wall of text. Let's move this so that's after the big wall of text. Oh. Oh. Why is that happening? So we wanted to move it after our big wall of text, but it's still before. Yeah, it's asynchronous, this request as well. So it's calling the function, setting up this request, and instead of waiting for it, JavaScript doesn't like to wait, so it just runs our console log right away. So, I mean, I guess we could do it here if we want to see it after the wall of text. Dog. So the better thing then would be able to set our environment variable not to dog, but to this GitHub token, so that it's no longer in my source code. It's in a separate config. It's in a separate variable. So the nice thing would be to be able to go that, and then I copy this. Or maybe I'm going to comment it out just for now, in case I lose it. Oh, but I can't there. I'll store it up top until we can for sure just get rid of it. So I want to be able to go, authorization is the token plus process env dot maybe like GitHub token. So I could do it this way. GitHub token. No. So I could do it this way, and we now have GitHub token being set, and if we look up at those requests, we have our ratings back up to 5,000. So it's working correctly, but if every time I share this with people, they need to like run it this way, they need to write GitHub token with that big thing before they run it. Super annoying. There's better ways of doing this. So the best, or at least the first way we're going to look at it, is with another node module called .env. So .env is a library that is a more convenient way of setting environment variables and separating code and config. But just by making a file in the root of our project, so GitHub gets, called .env, we can set key value pairs in here that will be loaded as environment variables. So I can do GitHub token, I think I called it, and I'm going to set that equal to this thing. I want to be able to read this in the file that I just used. And the way that we're saying we can do that is with .env. So if we look at the docs, so it says, as early as possible in your application, require and configure .env. So just by running require.env.config, it's going to add all of the key value pairs that we set up in that .env file to our process.environment. So to start with, let's get that. I'll do npm install .env -- save. We have it now. And it told us that we should go require .env and then config. So why here are we not, importing this module as a variable, but we're just requiring it and then doing this? Anyone have any ideas on why the difference between how we're getting requests and how we're getting .env? Yeah, we don't want to use .env for many things. We just want to use it to run this config function once. So we're requiring it, and right as we're requiring it, we're just saying run this config. And then after that, we don't need to save it to any variable because we're not going to use it again. This would just be like a waste of a variable if I said var equals .env. So what would be nice now is if we go process.env GitHub, and we're using an underscore, so we're going to have to use our square notation. GitHub token. We run our, let's run it without setting the export variable first. I see that the token is showing up here. It has quotations around it. So I'm just going to remove the quotations from the .env file because we don't want it with quotations. We just want it as the actual string. And inside of our project file, instead of doing, well, this should be fine now. Instead of having to set it before we're running it in the terminal, this is preset from that .env config thing, and we have all of our many API call usage. So .env is one way to keep these configuration and config separate. There's other ways of doing it. I think in your activity today you might use a JSON file. There are different ways that people have set it up. So the other thing we need to think about are secrets. So sometimes config stuff, we don't care if other people get it. If I'm just setting up the name of my database, maybe I'm not too worried about if other people know what that is, but I also don't want that to be the default. So we have a separate config from source there just so that it's more usable. The other time that we really want to keep our config separate from our actual source code is when it's data that's more secure, things that we don't want to just be shared with everyone when I'm posting to GitHub or when I'm sharing to you guys. This might be secret keys, tokens, passwords in our code that you don't want to publish. And the separation of code and configuration kind of supports this goal of having that stuff secret or hidden. To do this, we can keep our .env file private by adding it to the .gitignore file, so that it's not tracked by a repository and does not get published to GitHub or shared with other project members. So you may have or you may not have seen a .gitignore file at this point, but if I make a new file and I call it .gitignore, npm Git is smart enough that before you're doing these git add or staging your stuff, it looks for the existence of this file, and it looks through the file to ignore anything that you've listed here. So if I do .env, the other thing I probably want to ignore is node modules, because like we discussed on Friday, can be a really big folder, and when I'm sharing it with everyone else, I don't want them to have to download my node modules folder. So if I save that, and if I do a git init, and I do a git add all, and first commit. So we had 3 files added: .gitignore, GitHub gets.js, and package.json. We do not have .env here, which is exactly what we wanted. So now I'm posting it, I'm sharing it with everyone, and this .env file with my secret stuff in there, I could have like Travis's password equals. I could share that, and none of you would be getting it. And then also like node modules isn't in there. That's just helpful for like keeping my project slim, and you know, we discussed some of the benefits for that one. Yeah, we discussed it, but like again, it's just now we can share it with everyone without having to worry about people getting our config, getting our hidden things. The last thing though is, if you need to make your own .env file when you download my project, how do you know like what it's supposed to be structured out? How do you know what information to include in it? Because at this point, I'm saying I have this .env file with this stuff that you need for my project to run. You need to have a .env file with GitHub token. Well, in this case, you wouldn't need it because you would need it to have an upper level of API requests. But let's say we had more things in here, like a DB, a database name, which was something on your computer, and we had like a database password, which was another thing. You now need this .env file to be able to connect to the database on your computer. I put this project together, I send it to GitHub, you download it, and you don't have a .env file, and so your application, like you run GitHub gets, and it like breaks. It's like we don't know what this variable process.env.github token is. We don't know what this process.env.db name or db password is, so it won't work. What we then need to do is we need to communicate somehow to everyone downloading this application that they need this .env file and that it should be structured in a certain way. One way we could do that is with a README. We've seen with all of the projects that we've been posting to GitHub, we're going to include a README file with it, which we can include information just in text. The other way is that it's common to have a file itself that's called example.env. So in example.env, you could copy the contents of your env file just without the confidential information. So I would say, I want you to have a GitHub token. I want you to have a database name, a password, and maybe you don't need this one. So then when you download my project, you can look, is there an example.env? You open it up. Okay, to run this application, I'm going to need these 3 things set in my env. You would make a new env file and then put in your actual information that you need. And this example.env would not be included in the gitignore. So it's sent to everyone. Everyone would be able to see and use it. Yeah, I have another example of a env file in the notes that I'll give you. So wrapping up with our application, we can now get rid of this string here. We don't need to remember it anywhere but in our env file. We have two headers being set, user agent so that the API knows who we are, authorization so that we can get those juicy requests, and then we're getting the response and printing out the data that we're getting back. What would be nice is if we maybe loop through this data because it's issues. So we could do for body, we want to look at body.for each. And this takes a callback function for each issue. We want to console. We'll check if issue dot, I think there's a closed one, or maybe it's open. So if the issue is open, we're just going to console log open issue. Else, we're going to console log closed issue. And we can maybe do like some nice emojis. Open issue, close issue. Okay. Oh, that's not what we wanted. We wanted, there we go. So we're getting an error body.forEach is not a function. Any thoughts on why this is happening? So our body, it's not a function. I think we saw something similar this morning. What do we have to do to body before we can use it? Yeah, we need to parse it. So we could do JSON.parse. Oh. We'll get rid of this one console log so we can see it more clearly. Huh? Response. Okay. So jQuery has all of these issues, and they all look like they're closed, which makes sense. jQuery is pretty up-to-date repository. We could do some more formatting on it, but for now, we'll probably just leave it. So you'll end up doing something similar with your GitHub avatar downloader. I'll put this code up with the notes if you want to take a look at it. Any questions on the kind of flow of this at this point? So it's a bit similar to this morning, but again, request, it bundles all the data together in body for us. It makes it easier. Cool. That's all for now. Let me know if you have any questions or anything. And I'll put this notes up pretty soon so you can look at it.